Cars are getting bigger and bigger these days, but the Miata stays small in order to keep those excellent driving dynamics. In fact, the ND generation, the 4th generation, is actually even smaller than the NC, than that 3rd gen. I'm here with the Miata RF Grand Touring. We're gonna go through what's new for the 2023 model year. I'm gonna talk to you about the 2 different trim levels and what the differences are, and I'll tell you what this thing has been like to live with for the last week. Let's go ahead and take a look. There are plenty of reasons to buy a Miata, whether it's the drop top, whether it's the fact that it's relatively affordable compared to a lot of sports cars, a surprisingly good daily drivability, even in the pouring rain like we've had here this past week, but we'll get into that as we go here. But the biggest one, of course, is the driving dynamics. This is about as close as you can get to an analog experience at this price point in a modern car. Now, first off, the stats here for the geeks: it is about 2,450 pounds with a near 50-50 weight distribution. So if you're in the rag top, it's 5,149 front to back weight distribution. Here we add about 100 pounds, but that weight is mostly in the back, so it actually helps with the weight distribution. Not that that's something you're really gonna notice necessarily. Your next lightest sports car is gonna be the GR86 at 2,800 pounds, still about 300 pounds off from this. So that's gonna help a lot with the dynamics. And no matter which Miata you get rear drive limited slip differential, with one exception: if you get the Grand Touring in automatic transmission. That is the only way you can get the automatic transmission, is if you are in the Grand Touring. And if you do that, you lose that limited slip differential. You also lose the Bilstein shocks, and you lose one hell of a manual transmission. So I would not recommend getting the automatic. If that's you, fine, you do you. But I'm just saying, this is one of the best manuals out there. So let's talk about that manual transmission. It is not a particularly high-powered car, but it's lightweight. You're low to the ground, it still feels fast. And the fact that we have these super short gears in this transmission definitely helps with making it feel like you're going a lot faster than you are. We have a 7,500 RPM redline, and if you listen to the little indicator here, it'll tell you to be in 6th gear by 30 miles per hour. That's how short the gearing is. So as far as that tach goes, you're paying for the whole tach, you can use the whole tach. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th gear, and you're like, man, I gotta slow down. You look down, you're like, I am still going 10 under, I gotta catch up. That is really where the Miata shines, where these sort of quote-unquote low-powered, lightweight cars shine so well. You can just ring this thing out, and it's so notchy, it's so confident. Bam, right into gear. Very short throws as well. It's so fun to shift. And this is about the only lightweight clutch that I actually do not have a problem with. I prefer a heavier clutch, especially in a sports car, but Mazda does a good job of still having the clutch be communicative, even though it is light. So it actually helps a lot with the daily drive. You're not getting a leg workout every day in traffic. Hopefully you're not in traffic anyway, because if you're in 1st gear going light to light, probably not gonna have a lot of fun anyway. Now the steering is still electronic power steering. We're not talking about manual steering here, which makes it a lot easier than something if it were manual. The steering stays pretty heavy. It's not unassisted steering heavy, but it is heavy enough that you feel like you're actually working a little bit, and it does give you a little bit of communication. There is like maybe a tiny dead spot right in the middle of the steering, but not too much to speak of, and there is some communication going on with the wheels, and it feels very precise, and really no problem putting this thing right onto the line that you want to be on. Speaking of steering, if you want to throw this thing hard through a corner or two, why would you ever do that with the Miata? But last year they added kinematic posture control. So in the past, the Miata has had a pretty floppy back end when you throw it through corners hard. The kinematic posture control is something that was added to sort of help with that. It's a brake-based system that will sort of help with some of that roll in the corners. There is still a little bit of floppiness, you can still feel it going on, but it has improved since last year, since 2022, when they added that KPC, and that is across the board no matter which version of the Miata that you get. And outside of that, it's really pretty unassisted here. There is a lane departure warning. It's one of the beeping ones, not one of the ones that shoves you back in the lane. And there's a button over here to turn that off. That one is kind of intrusive, but I just leave it off. Therefore, no longer intrusive at all. The blind spot monitoring is there. That is huge because the pillar back here is the definition of a blind spot. It is, every time I look back there, I'm like, oh yeah, right. This is completely pointless to check my blind spot because I can't see anything at all. But that blind spot monitoring is a little bit on the aggressive side in terms of the beeping. But still better than not having it, especially with this kind of visibility. And visibility straight back is kind of pinhole small, not really a lot. You got a little bit of space between the seats. That's about all you can see back there. Out the front is pretty good though, and the sides, so no real issues there. But that straight back visibility is kind of to be expected in a sports car in general. That's kind of par for the course. And it does have cruise control. It's just regular cruise control. There is no adaptive cruise in this. There's no auto hold feature for when you're at the stoplights. There is a hill hold, but it is not like that Mark 8 I was in a couple weeks ago where it's super intrusive. It lets go right away when you need it to. Now, if you do want to get the back end out, like you do have your traction control button right here, easy to shut off. And it will step out on you if you wanted to. I have been in the pouring rain all week long. I've had the traction control on for those situations, but it actually hasn't even had to come on. So I've been really surprised at how good the traction has been in general here. Even in that pouring rain, it was pouring so hard the other day that I had to pull off the highway and stop and wait, and that is not something that I do very often. Like, I couldn't see anything, but I never had issues with traction. I've got the Bridgestone Potenza S001s on this. It also rides surprisingly well. Like, I have not really had any issues with the ride quality. If you hit big bumps, yeah, you're gonna feel the big bumps, but generally on most roads, it's gonna be fine. Easy to daily drive. This is not gonna beat you up nearly as much as I would have expected in a car that is this low to the ground. It is loud in here. It's not as loud as the cloth top, with the one real issue for noise being, but it is still loud in general. You know, you have the wind buffeting, which is a big problem with the RF version, especially on the highway. You get a lot of the wind buffeting, and you can hear the engine noise. Of course, you want to hear the engine noise if you're into cars. Most people want to hear that. I don't have any problems with listening to that. It doesn't get drony. It's fun to listen to, especially when you ring it out. Under the hood here, no changes from last year. We've got the 2-liter Skyactiv G motor. This is a 4-cylinder. It is naturally aspirated, no turbos in this one. Makes 181 horsepower and 151 pound-feet of torque. Those numbers went up for the ND2, that refresh that happened in 2019. It's still not a huge amount of power, but that is what makes the Miata so special. So you have that 7500 redline and not a whole lot of power, not a whole lot of torque, and you can just wring this thing out. As you can see here, we have a brand new color for 2023. This one is called Zircon Sand. So if you've been looking for a sports car to match that beige Camry you drove in high school, it is finally here. It's very compact, great looking profile from the side. As you can see, we've got the RF, the hard top, so you've got the coupe look to it. Though it is more of a Targa than a full-on convertible like you get when you get the rag top. Very compact overall, 154 inches overall, 91-inch wheelbase. If you think about other small cars, even things like the Z4 is going to get you like a 97-inch wheelbase. So very, very compact here. And those wheels are 17s. Those are wrapped in summer performance tires, as a rear drive sports car should be. Now, even if you option the club trim level, you're still going to be on 17s with the summer tires, but you're going to get the forged BBS wheels and you're going to get the Brembo brakes. Now, that is different if you are in the cloth. If you get that rag top, then that is a package with the Recaros, the BBS, and the Brembo brakes. We do have keyless access with the button here on the door handle for lock and unlock. We've got auto dimming mirrors here just in the Grand Touring trim. If you get the club, you don't get the auto dimming mirror. That is just on the driver's side, and that has blind spot monitoring on both sides, of course. Up front, we've got that classic Miata smile. Look how happy this thing is with the gloss black in through here and some cooling down underneath. You get that front air dam. That is about the only accessory, the front air dam, as well as a spoiler. Those are the only two accessories that can be added on, and those come standard when you get the club trim level. They can be added on here to the Grand Touring. We do have fog lights here. We've got LED headlights, LED daytime running lights. Those are standard, but the automatic headlights and the auto high beams, as well as the adaptive headlights for those corners, that is only part of the Grand Touring. So you get LEDs no matter what, but you don't get the auto and you don't get the cornering, the adaptive headlights. From the back end here, great looking back end of this car. I love the design back here. Looking through the back window, it almost looks like you actually have some visibility, but let me assure you that there is very little visibility from the inside of this thing. Got the MX-5 logo. That is Mazda Experiment Project number 5. I would say this thing worked out pretty well 30 years later. Got the Skyactiv G because that is the motor in this one. LED tails. Got the dual pipes for the exhaust down here. Like I mentioned, you can option a subtle little spoiler here that will be standard if you're on the club trim. That's an option here on the GT. We got the little shark fin as well. And if you want to open up the trunk here, there's a button on the inside, or there's a button right here on this dinky little key. Wish this thing had a little bit more weight to it, but just hold down the trunk button and it opens up into a measly 4.48 cubic feet of space. It's actually a little bit smaller than if you were in the ragtop. The ragtop version will get you 4.59 cubic feet of space. So just slightly smaller here, so it has room for that retractable top. But either way, not a whole lot of storage. Inside here, we've got about as much space as a New York City apartment and about the same cost as a year's rent. So very tight in here. This is about the only time I can look up at the tall people and tell them that it sucks to be tall, because I can actually fit in this. So other short people with me, it's nice that we can actually fit in these cars. As you can see, I still had to kind of pretzel myself a little bit even to get in here at 5'7". And once I'm in, it's tight, but it's doable. My visibility is fine in my seating position. No issues here all around. So like my head's not hitting, even with this RF. Looking around, you know, most of this is going to be pretty similar to the club trim. There are going to be a few differences here. You're not going to get the nav. That is one of the differences. You get the nav in the Grand Touring. You don't get that in the club, but you still have Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, both standard, both wired. So I've got the phone cord spaghetti thing going on up here, and the seats are going to be different. Since it's the RF, you're going to get the Recaro seats. If you're in the ragtop, then the Recaros are part of that package that I mentioned before, where you've got the BBS wheels, the Brembo brakes, and those Recaro seats. These are the leather seats in the Grand Touring. You can get Napa leather. It's a brown Napa leather, and you can only get that if you get the more boring colors on the outside. So you get white, you get quartz, or you get silver, and then you can get the Napa leather seats. Otherwise, it's these leather seats, and these are really comfortable. I've got no problems with them. They're bolstered a little bit on the aggressive side, but not too bad. They're cushioned well enough. Manually adjustable, no power adjustability here. You do have heat, and that doesn't matter which trim level you're in. We got a little bit of the beige coming in to the inside. We got some leather trim around here. We got some hard plastics, a little bit here to be expected at this price point. It does keep the cost down, and those aren't really touch points. Leather wrap steering wheel on the thin side. I like a beefy steering wheel, but you know, that's personal preference. It's the same steering wheel in pretty much every Mazda product now. Comfortable enough. It's got the buttons, just a handful of buttons here. Well laid out physical buttons for infotainment, for voice control, for cruise control, standard stuff. Now, gauge cluster laid out really nicely. Big tack in the middle like you want to see with a sports car, especially a manual sports car. Speed analog off to the side. You got a little bit of digital information off to the left, but it's clean, it's simple. You can cycle through a few different menus over there. Apparently I'm getting 36 miles per gallon without even trying, so that's pretty cool. Traffic sign recognition in there as well. That is only because we're in the Grand Touring. That is not in the club trim level. That's the way you lay out a gauge cluster in a sports car. I love that, absolutely. Physical knobs, for the HVAC. Love to see that. Physical buttons for the heated seats. The switch for the top, you do have to hold that down. It takes about 13 seconds to open and close, and you cannot really be moving. I was trying to do this in a parking lot going like 4 miles an hour, and it kept stopping on me. So it's a little bit annoying that you have to hold it down, and it's a little bit annoying that you can't even be going like a few miles an hour, but not the end of the world there. 13 seconds feels like a long time, just especially because the rag top is just manual. You just flip it, throw it back, and done. Got the manual handbrake. Love to see that. Those are dying very quickly nowadays, along with manual transmissions, and your super tight gearbox. The infotainment system here, a little tiny screen. This is your same infotainment that you've got in all of the Mazdas, and you know, it's controversial. I've talked about it, a lot of people have talked about it. It's not my favorite thing. I don't like the scroll knob. I find it cumbersome to use, especially for Android Auto. When you're stopped, use the infotainment like a touchscreen. It is touch sensitive, but then when you start moving, then you have to use the knob. But that is just for the standard infotainment. So if I'm hooked into Android Auto, then even at a stop, I have to use the knob, and that's just a little bit annoying. Especially with all the warnings it's been giving me. I've been flash flood warnings constantly this week, and it's like there will be 10 of them in a row, and I have to like scroll and click close and scroll and click close and scroll and click close. It's just really been kind of annoying. But you don't buy a sports car for the infotainment, so you know, it does get, we do have music pumped through a 9-speaker Bose sound system, so that's a nice touch. The headrests have speakers, there's a subwoofer. Really pretty good sound going around here, and with the RF versus a convertible, you can actually hear it a lot better. There was so much more noise inside, it was kind of hard to hear. With the RF, I can actually hear the music coming through, and it sounds pretty nice. We got the auto dimming mirror here with the home link. This is only because we're in the Grand Touring. The Club does not get the auto dimming, it doesn't get the home link, so now you gotta find a spot for your garage opener. Probably clip it up there. Not the biggest deal, not the end of the world, but it's one more thing that you have to carry around. And this interior does not have a lot of space to carry stuff around, in case you haven't noticed. There's a little bit of storage right here behind me, tiny bit. There's a little bit more storage behind the passenger seat, but it's really not much, and then that's a little bit cumbersome to get to. Cup holders are out of the way, which is a big problem with manual transmissions, always bumping into the cups. Even the ones that do it well, you still bump the cups a little bit typically, but this one has removable cup holders, so you know, that makes it a lot easier. You can put it over here. That is out of the way. It's also kind of unusable when you're driving, but it's out of the way at least. For those of you trying to carry kids around in your car, there is a capacitive sensor here in the seat, as well as a weight sensor. So if you got the child seat in there, it should not be a problem. It should have the passenger airbag off, but there is nowhere to anchor it in. There are no anchors down at the bottom, and there's no anchor behind the seat. So even the Supra, even the Z at least had the anchor behind the seat, but this one does not have that, interestingly. So that's something to note for those of you trying to carry kids around. You have to get something that works without any kind of latches or anchors. But at the end of the day here, we have some clear sacrifices being made. Of course, the space is the biggest one. There is not much space going on at all. So if you've got to carry kids around, or you've got to carry a lot of stuff, then it's going to be a problem. It is pretty loud in here, even with the hard top. But the top does come off, so you know, not really an unexpected thing. And we don't have the latest and greatest in terms of tech and features, but that keeps the price down, and it keeps it to about as analog of an experience as you're going to get at this price point, brand new here in 2023. And I still like this over the GR86 and the BRZ. It's got the nice short throws and the notchy shifter. It's got the nicer interior materials, and the fact that the top comes off is definitely a pretty big advantage here, and it rides a lot better than the GR86 or the BRZ twins. And then there's the fact that it lets you do what it has always done well, which is have fun on the streets at legal speeds. You can give this to someone who's a less experienced driver, and they won't be slamming it into walls because they have way too much power. The light clutch is easy in traffic, makes it easier to learn on as well. It's just such a great car all around, as long as you are not too tall to fit and you don't have too much stuff or too many people that you need to carry around. And while Miata has always been the answer, it is now the answer to one more question. That is, can I get a sports car that matches my beige Camry? That's all for this time. Make sure to hit all those YouTube buttons, all the things down below in order to help get me into more cars and bring more cars to you. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I will see you next time.